Good evening. Good evening, everybody. My name is Rick Armstrong. I am a recovered alcoholic, gratefully and fully. Um, Quick housekeeping item. I did just get a new puppy, so we're still sorting out the hierarchy with the cat. So you might hear some barking and yipping and yelling. Um, Hopefully not, but probably will happen. Um, yeah, I guess a little bit about me. I'm Canadian. I live in Canada. I grew up in a city called Calgary, central west, kind of straight north of Montana, pretty much. Um, I know I've spoken at a couple American meetings, and they all think we're little. The city I grew up in is about Calgary's about 1.7 million people, so it's by no means a little town. Um, the environment that I grew up in was vastly multicultural. Um, I was a white minority growing up, um, which all kind of plays into my story and development. My father was an alcoholic. He was a railroader. He was only there part time, as the nature of the railroad. When he was there, he was not present, and if he wasn't in a good mood. And all those things kind of contributed to what I thought life looked like as a man. Um, my mother was a very staunch Catholic woman who had very strong opinions about the church, but also simultaneously was really good at turning a blind eye and living in her own little reality. She had some mental health issues. She ended up in the psych ward off and on, um, it, when I was young, leaving me with my dad. Um, that whole multicultural piece, like there was a lot of gang stuff that went on where I grew up, in specifically in the neighborhood, not the whole city, but I grew up on the wrong side of the tracks or in that neighborhood that, every city's got one of those neighborhoods, right? And that's where I grew up. Um, being I'm a pretty big guy, like 6'2", 250. Um, I was big from a young age. Everybody thought I was going to be some pro football player or basketball player, but I can't jump worth a shit. So that didn't work out for me. Um, but I really stood out, right? Like a really big white kid in this minority group. And all of these minority groups, I don't know what your gang life is like, if you have anywhere you're at, but it's really culturally divided. Um, so being a lone white guy, I was kind of like out of place. So I realized after a couple incidents of violence against myself, um, I needed to fit in somewhere. So this is where a lot of my character flaws started coming up, I think. Um, Probably by like the first time I had a gun pulled on me was like the fourth grade. Um, I've been stabbed a couple times by the time I hit junior high. And and I really started figuring out that I needed to be somebody that I wasn't in order just to be safe. Whether that was at home, whether that was at school, whether that was just out playing with my buddies. And so really quickly I became a character, and I know the book talks about being a director and trying to be the actor and everybody, and I for sure was an actor, and I got really, really good at it. And just playing whatever role I thought I needed to get by. And unfortunately for me, I think that started at such a young age that I never really developed a sense of who I was to start with. Um, so I've worked with a lot of people in recovery, and a lot of them talk about trying to find the person they used to be before alcohol took over, or drugs and alcohol. I'm a non-denominational. I've got some outside issues. Well, I had some outside issues too, just for the record. But alcohol is definitely my primary problem. But talking with people that have achieved recovery or working towards recovery, they always want to get back to the person they were, and for me that was really difficult because I didn't even know who I was to start with, because I'd been a character playing roles for so long that I didn't know who I was. And by the time I was drinking by probably 12, 13, onto some softer drugs after that. And that just progressed, by high school, me and my associates were pretty big into moving quite a bit of illicit products. So I was always just this guy that I never wanted to be, never thought I was. But it worked for me. Like all the while, I was really successful in school. I was a good athlete. Teachers liked me, girls liked me, guys like I was popular. I didn't struggle too hard, but it was never genuine. Like I was never actually me. I was always just being somebody for somebody else, and that progressed all the way through my life. It kind of came to a head in Calgary for me one night when a friend of mine was murdered. Well, he wasn't murdered, but he went into a coma in my arms and never woke up. Passed away. We were 17 when that happened. And after that, the police kind of came to my parents and said, you got to get him out of town or he's going to end up dead or in jail. That was kind of the path I was on. My father, being a railroader, having some seniority, he had the ability to just move, right? So we ended up here in the city, Medicine Hat, about 65,000 people. And definitely not the environment that I grew up. Yeah, I moved to Medicine Hat, and it's a town about 65,000 people, predominantly Caucasian. None of the issues that I grew up with. But the problem is that character that I played had become so ingrained in who I was and who I thought I needed to be. I came here with a chip on my shoulder and a violent tendency and some substance abuse that set me apart from people in this area. Going back, I guess, a little bit into my childhood, I'm not one that believes that, addiction is all based on childhood trauma. I absolutely think that there's some elements to that, but it's a combination of a whole bunch of things. I think in my experience, there's absolutely things that contribute, but I'm confident this is how I'm wired. This is who I am. It's what I am. It's in me. It's in my DNA. But I can go back to my first childhood memories were like laying in bed, trying to hold my breath until I passed out. Because it was really comfortable. That numb feeling was really comfortable. And I think I just chased that once I found alcohol and other substances. It was easy to achieve that feeling. And so I was running from myself and everything and trying to just be somebody I wasn't. And part of that whole character flaw of being a character is it's all lies, right? Everything. It's all lies. I was a liar from the day I was born. Playing these characters and never being genuine. Everything that came out of my mouth was a lie. There wasn't an honest bone in me. And it's kind of a hard habit to kick. Anyway, as I graduated high school here in Medicine Hat, again, despite myself and my problems, school was easy to me. Girls were easy to me. Career was easy to me. I ended up in the oil fields here in Alberta, which is kind of the industry. Get out of high school with a high school diploma and you're making $200,000 a year with nothing but a high school education a week after graduating. I was clearing $10,000 checks every 2 weeks. And for a guy with some issues, that money makes not good. I wasn't responsible with it. Mind you, I don't know how many 18-year-olds would be responsible with it, but you multiply that with all of my character flaws, it was bad. And so lots of women, lots of drugs, lots of partying, and that went on for a few years, just progressively getting worse and worse. And my behavior is getting worse and worse. And I ended up meeting this young lady. And so the way the oil field works here, it's a shift. You're on for 15 days straight. You're home for 6. So my hitch days off, I met this girl and, do what young people do and hung out for a while. And went back to work for another 15 days, came home, liked the girl, hung out again, went back on my next hitch. And it was pretty quick. We found out she was pregnant. And I was actually in police custody that night because I was drunk at a bar in a little town and got in a fight with a local guy, which was my norm. And I was actually in police custody when my wife, now wife, told me that she was pregnant with our first kid. And I was 21 years old. So life got really real quick. And that was the first time that I ever thought to myself, I need to quit what I'm doing. I need to do better. It was the first time I realized that my father was maybe doing his best with what he had. And I knew I didn't want to be my dad. I didn't want my kid to grow up with the same father that I had. And for sure some resentment there still, but well, I shouldn't say still, but at that time. So I made the decision while I was getting released from remand there to get clean, get sober, get my life together. And I meant it with every bone in my body. And I made it about 16 hours. And I was back doing it again. And when I say I meant it, like, you could have hooked me up to a polygraph and I would have passed it. Every bone in my body wanted to give it up. And despite that desire, I was back at it. And that's when something switched inside of me, I think. And I started building, I was 21 years old, a pile of money. It was fun then. It was still fun. And I was partying, and I was able to facilitate it. And, there was a lot of emotions I was burying, but it was still, I don't mean to glorify it, but, it was still a party. I was a young guy having fun until that happened. And once I realized that I was drinking and using against my will, it was like a light switch. All of a sudden, this new emotion hit me, and that was guilt. And I felt guilty that I was lying to people. I told my wife I was going to give it up. I was going to be a better person. I was going to be a better parent. And I started lying about it and telling people I wasn't using when I was, and so on and so forth. And I managed to kind of keep that lie alive for, well, quite a while, but obviously it comes out time to time. But the more I drank, the more I used, the more I tried to hide it, the more that guilt ate at me. And that's when that's the second time I realized I was screwed, because the more I drank, the more guilty I felt, but the only thing that could make that guilt go away was getting numb and doing it again. And I got caught in this cycle. Like, pardon my language, but I always call it the shit snowball. So it just keeps getting worse, right? It's just that cycle. I get consumed by guilt and shame. I need to numb that. I do whatever I need to do to numb that. And lo and behold, I wake up the next morning with more guilt and more shame. Takes more booze, and it just keeps growing, this beast. And that rotting feeling of the guilt and shame. Well, I think guilt more at that point. And the more that progressed, the more my behavior got worse, the more altercations there were, the more police involvement there was. Womanizing really became an issue. Despite all that, my now wife, we had another child. I've got 3 teenage boys now. Actually, my oldest boy's graduating tomorrow. So, we tried to build this happy life, right? And it was, despite all of the things that was going on. And again, like, I can't emphasize enough, the hard part for me is despite myself, I was successful. Despite my behavior, I was successful. I climbed the corporate ladder within the oil patch really well. I made a bunch of money. I came out of the oil patch because I wanted to be around my kids more. And I thought maybe the responsibility of being at home would force me to be a little better behaved than living hotel to hotel. And like any geographic fix, even if that geography is coming home, it didn't work. But I started a construction company. My construction company took off, very successful, made a pile of money. I had the life, I painted that picture that everybody's chasing. Big, beautiful house on a golf course, cars, truck, campers, family trips to Mexico. So to me, I didn't actually recognize that I had any kind of problem, because alcoholics or homeless people that live under a bridge, or they're my dad, who wasn't particularly successful, who just hid in the basement and drank by himself. And I was still very social about it. But I would like throw parties. I was needed to be the center of attention, but at the same time felt terribly alone, right? I'd have house parties and have 100 people and have it catered and open bar, and I'd still be in the corner by myself, just thinking everybody's talking about me, even though I invited them all there. It's a crazy, crazy life. And that lifestyle progressed. And again, adultery was a thing for me. It was a big thing that went with the character I was, the behavior, the life that I lived. And one day, one of those relationships came to light, and my wife, I was given the opportunity. I was given about a 3-minute decision to make, whether a woman's husband phones her and tells her, or I do. And being this chivalrous man I was like, no, it's something I got to do. So I took something from my wife that day that I'll never be able to get back. And I still struggle with that. Having to tell the truth and having to come clean. And I knew immediately that, that was just going to start. That was like one domino falling, the house of cards coming down. It was, once that came to light, this whole facade that I had built was coming down, and everybody was going to see the real me, which was somebody that I hated. And I genuinely mean that. I would wake up every morning, damn near every morning, and look in the mirror and not just think it, but like audibly say how much I hate that guy. And you did it again. And as I seen what that did to my wife and my kids and my family, again, I had a little switch, and I now recognize that switch was from guilt, like I've done something wrong, to shame, which is, instead of I made the mistake, it was I am a mistake. And I was trying to process my way through it. Again, not really recognizing drugs and alcohol as a problem. And I'm sorry I keep referencing drugs, but it's part of the package with me. I absolutely am an alcoholic, and I'm sorry if there's primary purpose people here, but it's a package for me. And I remember trying to figure out what was wrong with me, and realizing, I got three young men that I'm trying to be an example of what it means to be a man, and how terribly I had failed them at even being an example. And how can these kids ever look up to me? I don't want them to look up to me. I don't want them to. And a city of 65,000 people, you're no more than 2 degrees separation away from anybody. So if I don't know you, somebody that knows me knows you. And so my kids were going to have to live in the shadow of who I was. They were going to have to come up in this city. So whatever they were going to do, whether it's, work or girlfriends or school, they were always going to be, oh, you're that guy's kid. And I got to a point that the only logical decision was to take my life. And I knew, I was, as delusional as I was, I thought I was pretty clear-headed about it. I knew my family would grieve me, but I thought that small grief, and I don't mean small, it would obviously be big, but time lap, right? They'd grieve me for 6 months, a year, but then they'd all move on. Kids are resilient. My wife, amazing woman. She would find somebody way better than me. She would move on. And but if I stuck around, who I was would torment them for the rest of their lives. And so I got to a point that taking my life was the best thing I could do, and the least selfish thing I could do. I genuinely thought it was, what was best for everybody else. Sorry, my kid's looking at me. Time out 1 second. Sorry. So somebody that was dear to me recognized the state that I was in as I started. I really needed people, well, not even lots of people. I needed a couple people to understand why I was doing what I was doing, why I was about to do what I was going to do, and need them to understand that it wasn't selfish. It wasn't about me trying to escape what I did. It was for other people. And one gentleman in particular, who ironically was my father-in-law, of all the people in the world that should hate me at that moment, it was my father-in-law that recognized where I was at, and he came and picked me up, and I don't recommend this to anybody who's ever dealt with somebody suicidal, but he says, I got in this truck, and he goes, you got a choice to make, one choice, only one choice. Either we're going to go kill you, I'm going to help you, we're going to get it over with, and we're going to do it, and everybody can move on. Or you can be a man about it and try to solve this problem and do something. He said, the only thing you're ever going to teach your kids if you check out right now is it's okay to quit. He goes, if that's the image, if that's the message you want to leave them with, then okay, that's your choice. Let's go get it over with. And despite my headspace, I didn't want to disappoint him. I didn't want him mad at me. So I was like, okay, well, I made a deal with myself. I got a couple more boxes I can check. And as long as I check those boxes and I still feel the way I do, and then I've done my due diligence, right? I've tried to get help. I've tried to do what I can do, and it didn't work. And yes, I'm now, again, terribly sick in my mind and my thinking, but now I'm more justified in my decision. So he took me to what's called ADAC here. It's like the government addiction crisis facility, right? I don't know if your state has one, but it's the government, it's government health is what it is. So I went there and I was shuffled through like cattle, right? And it was take a number. I sat down with an intake lady and I said, and I just spilled my guts for the first time in my life. I was honest, right? And I'm like, listen, I don't know if I'm a drug addict. I don't know if I'm an alcoholic. I don't know if I'm crazy. I don't know if I'm a pervert. I don't know if I'm a sex addict. I don't know if I'm a porn addict, or I don't know if I'm just crazy. I don't know, but and blah, right? Just spilled my guts. And this poor young lady, I don't know if she was a practicum student or new, but she was like a deer in the headlights. She didn't know what the hell to say to me. So, I'm sure you all have heard Canada's got public health care and it's free and it's awesome. And absolutely there's elements that are. One of the big problems is, especially with mental health and addiction, that day they said, okay, and that date was September 16th, 2016. They said, okay, we can get a counselor to see you, come back on, and the date was October 28th. So 6 weeks later, they were expecting me to come back. And I told them, I said, I just told you I'm going to kill myself, and you're telling me to come back in 6 weeks. And at that moment, I felt like a burden to everybody around me. And then when I go to the place that's supposed to help me and they tell me to come back in 6 weeks, it just kind of reemphasized that I was in fact a burden, right? And so she gives me just a bunch of pamphlets and she goes, I don't know, check out some of these meetings, some of these support groups in the meantime. And so I was like, whatever, kind of wrote off the whole thing. And I'm like, boom, there we go. I'm justified now. I've gone to the place that was supposed to help me. They couldn't help me. I'm justified. So I went back out to the truck and I'm like, no, they can't help me. And I slammed all these pamphlets down. He goes, what do you mean? You got all these? It's my father-in-law. He picked up the first one. It was an AA pamphlet. And he goes, there's a meeting in 7 minutes. Let's go. And keep in mind, despite being, I was the guy that was in the bar at 10 o'clock until 5 o'clock every day, go home, have dinner, and then go back out with the boys. That's how I drank. Every day, 7 days a week. So despite that, I didn't think I had a drinking problem still because, again, despite myself, I was successful. I had all those things. So how could I have a problem? So I never identified as an alcoholic. At any rate, being in construction, I know fire code, so I know there's 2 exits to every building. So when my father-in-law dropped me off, my intent was to walk in the front door and walk out the back door. And, he knew the meeting was about an hour, so that would give me an hour to go do what I was going to do and end my life. So when you hear people say that they walked into AA and it was the last door for them, it was the last door for me. I walked in that door with every intent of not even staying for the meeting, like every intent of walking right through that building, out the back, and taking my life. And I walked in the door and I was met by a gentleman. He looked at me, I'm scanning the room, trying to find the exit. And I obviously had that. If anybody spent any time in rooms, the look of that new guy who was absolutely broken, right? And I obviously had that look on my face. And a guy that's now my best friend, he approached me. His name's Damien. I know Josh knows him pretty well here, but he came up and just introduced himself. And I was looking around that room, and I mean, there was 70-year-old farmers, there was 50-year-old librarian ladies, there was all, my brain immediately went to why I didn't belong there. I don't fit in. These aren't my people, just everything that made me different, like so many of us do. And Damien made me sit down beside him, and I was trying to get away, but overtly getting away, not really obvious, but. And he sits down and rolls up his sleeves, and he's tattooed up, and you can't see me, but I'm pretty heavily tattooed myself. So this guy's an oil field guy, and all of a sudden I can relate to somebody in the room. And I don't remember much of that first meeting at all, but I stayed. And then after that meeting, he asked me to go for a coffee with him, and I went. And sitting there with him, he told me his story, and his story wasn't the same as mine, but the emotions that he had, the feelings that he felt, completely different background, completely different upbringing, but those feelings were the same. And then that's when he said, and I'm an alcoholic. And it was like getting punched in the face, because I couldn't really deny it at that point. If I related to this guy because all the things that he felt, and all of those things that he felt made him an alcoholic, I guess that means I'm an alcoholic. And it's terrifying and really relief. There was a ton of relief at the same time, because he goes, you got what I got. I can, you've got this thing that we've got. He goes, the good news is there's a solution, and I know it. And he goes, I got a book for you, and you're going to read this thing, and you're going to do what it tells you, and I'm going to help you. And despite, I think I kind of referenced earlier, my mother was a pretty staunch Catholic, and I grew up to despise and really resent the church, the institution more than the teachings. But I distanced myself from that long ago, and had a lot of resentment. So as soon as he said, I've got a book, I'm like, nah, I'm not into that. I'm not sure what's in that book, but I want no part of it. Right. And he goes, no, man, he goes, well, what do you got to lose? Honestly, is kind of where he came at it from. He goes, well, you can always go kill yourself. That option's always there tomorrow. You might as well try something different and see what it does. And he made me make him a deal that, despite my disbelief, despite me thinking they're wrong, he goes, just try it. He goes, give me 2 weeks. Give me 2 weeks of your time, and you do everything I say. And if you still want to go off yourself, That option's still on the table, man. Nobody's ever going to take that away from me. And so we went to work, and I made it through 12 steps in about 16 days. And a lot of those steps, I didn't necessarily, I've had to revisit them for sure. Because to be honest with you, some of them I just kind of, yeah, okay, I'll say that, but didn't really process it. Struggled a lot with the God concept. I remember going back to my second, third, fourth, 10th meeting. I remember looking up at the wall and seeing all the steps, and anything that said God or prayer, I was like, nope. And I'm like, well, we'll see what we can do with, 7 out of 12 steps. And it did work. Sorry, my kid's back again. Sorry. Yeah, 7 out of 12. I'm like, well, whatever. Can't be any worse. But, immediately I had hope. And that was something that I hadn't had in a long time. So the difference in the man that I was from September 16th to September 30th was night and day. I was a ways from God, but I had faith. I had hope. And that was everything. That it was all I needed. It gave me a renewed vigor, and boom, I'm on that pink cloud that we all hear about, if not experienced. And by about 6 weeks, I was sponsoring my first guy, and that was, seeing that light turn on in him was something. No drink, no drug, no woman, nothing ever gave me that feeling, that high, for lack of a better word, right? Is knowing that I contributed to somebody and helped them through something that I know is so, so difficult. And I rode that out. But there was a little bit of alcoholic that I didn't let go of. And as I was working through my steps, the amends that I started to make with my wife, I found a loophole, as we tend to. And that loophole where, unless it would hurt them or others. And I'm like, man, if I come clean about all of the women and all of the things I did, there's people that are married, there's other families involved. So I found this like loophole that if I came clean about everything, it's going to hurt other people. It's going to hurt my wife more. Potentially it's going to ruin more families. And I rode that loophole. I was like, no. And I talked to some people in the program, and maybe some people that I shouldn't have, but I was new and naive and just jumped at anybody who would take me for a coffee, really. And I got some bad advice. They were like, hey, man, if, you don't have any right to blow up to tell somebody else's truth. And I was like, perfect. That's the only thing I needed to hear. So I wrote it out. So that went on about 2 years. Well, another year. And then I got the opportunity to move. So I'd been sober for about a year. Hadn't quite been as thorough as I should have. Got the opportunity for the relocation. And I thought it was a great opportunity for myself, for my kids, to move out of that shadow of who I was, fresh start, all that business. Part of that is when we moved, I'm like, I don't want to be Rick the alcoholic anymore. I just want to be Rick that doesn't drink. I don't want to have to explain, justify. I don't want to go to meetings. I don't want to do any of that. I just want to carry on with my life. And so I made it about 8 months with no program. And lo and behold, I'm suicidal again. And that's when I think the real realization of, it's like that second surrender. I've heard people talk about the second surrender, right? And it was like, I am exactly what this book says. I need exactly what this book says, as it said. And it saved my life. And I remember I remember I was that day that I was going to take my life the second time. I was out on a lake and it was beautiful, and it was just the beginning of summer here, so ice was just starting to thin out on the lake. So my plan was I was going to drive out on the ice, and I knew it wouldn't support my truck and it would go through the ice. And the job that I had, it could have been a work related accident. So I had thought it out, man. Like my insurance would double, the kids would be taken care of, everybody would get paid. So I had a pretty solid plan. I was sitting there at that boat launch and I rolled down the window, still not really a believer. And I remember like praying out loud and going, God, this is your moment. This is your moment. This is it. This is all I got. I need something. I need a sign. I need something. And I rolled the window down. I got real quiet, and I'm like looking for a bird or a deer to walk out of the bush, or a cloud to float by that I could misinterpret as God, like anything, right? Desperate for something. And nothing. And I was so bitter that even God had forsaken me in that moment. And I was just blinded with anger. And I threw my truck in reverse and I drove back into town. There's a big Catholic church there, the only church that I knew. And I walk up to the door and I'm going to chew out the priest. I got this plan. I got the speech in my head. And evidently, it's not like the movies. Churches aren't just unlocked. I thought I'd be able to walk in anytime I wanted, but no, I got to like call, make an appointment. So I do. I get a hold of the priest eventually, and he shows up, and I'm in a huff, and I'm angry, and I'm swearing, I'm angry, and I tried. I gave God the chance, and he listened, and he listened, and he listened, and finally, about 20 minutes after me violently swearing and just disrespecting the building I was in, he finally says to me, he goes, "You alcoholics are all the same." I'm like, what does that mean? And he goes, "You're all looking for the burning bush or that bolt of lightning." He goes, "The thing about God is he's real quiet. He just whispers. It's not a bolt of lightning. It's not a burning bush. It's a whisper." He goes, "You tell me what you asked God for." I said, "Well, I was sitting there and I asked him for a sign so I didn't kill myself." And he goes, "And did you?" "No." He goes, "Where are you sitting right now?" "In a church." He goes, "Let me get this straight. You're pissed off at God because he didn't answer your prayer, because you wanted to not die, and you were looking for a sign, and now you're alive and you're sitting in a church." He says, "He's not going to throw a bolt of lightning at you, man. He's going to whisper, and you better figure out what you're listening. Like, you need to listen for it." And I'm still working my way through my relationship with God, but I'm still a long ways away from, I don't even know where, but I mean, I'm willing, and I'm having conversations, and I've got faith for sure. And that's something that's been a blessing to me. And that, in that moment, I really doubled down, and I realized that this program is what I need. And I've made it a part of my life. I live this program 24/7. I've actually started a nonprofit, kind of with respect to the tradition that we introduced at the beginning of this thing. We do keep AA out of it, but it is for sure got a 12-step foundation to it. And we're just there for people in that moment that I needed somebody to be there for me. And I was told to come back in 6 weeks. That's why we exist in my organization. It's all 12-step guys that have been there. And I've been lucky enough to get into some rooms with some really, really influential people, policymakers, government officials, premiers, which is like senators, you know, and have a lot of conversations with a lot of people and try to help people change some of the policy. And for me, my big thing is getting people to understand that alcoholics aren't homeless people under the bridge. it's you, it's me, it's my kid, it's the guy that cuts my meat at the butcher shop. They're all of us, right? And so many of us don't even know the illness that we have. So I think it's really important to be there. And a lot of these conversations I've had have come to a point that, I say, and I stand by this statement, and keep in mind, it is very much a 12-step based approach that I have to life, but I've got it simplified into two things. And, this is a gift. And I will say that alcoholism is a gift that I have. It was given to me by somebody, something, still working out, but it's a gift because he gave me the two things that saved my life. And that's a purpose and a community. And that's the hole that I was trying to fill my whole life for 36 years until I found this. It's 12 simple steps. It's a simple program. We've all heard, the one-liners in enough meetings. For me, it's two things. It's purpose, and it's that 12 step, and it's community. That's what this program is to me. That's what saved my life. And with that, I'd just like to say thanks for the invite to Josh and to Andy, and hopefully we got through that without my dog barking. So I think it's a win. So thanks a lot, everybody.
Man, thank you so much for